Hey guys, today I've been thinking a lot recently about tropes and that I don't like them. Well, it's not like it's impossible to not like tropes, okay? I'm gonna get off my high horse for a second. So tropes or plot archetypes are, well, it's not even necessarily just plots. It's any pattern in literature or stories, right? And I feel like there's been such a big emphasis on tropes lately. Really, not even lately, but the past few years, and I still don't care about them. I mentioned this in my unpopular opinions video. I don't know. Whenever I hear that something has a trope, it does nothing for me. I'm not drawn and I'm not repelled. It doesn't matter to me if a trope is there. I wanted to make a video about things that we can care about that are not tropes. And keep in mind, the fact that I'm able to come up with a list of things that we can care about across multiple stories, that's also a pattern in literature. I'm not saying I'm free of tropes altogether necessarily. I think that if you think about it too hard, any pattern of literature becomes an archetype. I'm just not really into this kind of emphasis on specific plot archetypes. Enemies to lovers, grumpy sunshine, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. I don't care. And so I tried to think, what do I like about, what patterns do I look for? How do I know in a synopsis that I will like a book? And so I'm going to talk about what those things are today. And these are some things that we can care about when we're looking for things to read that aren't tropey. So first and foremost, what I look for when I'm looking for something to read, if I'm reading about a particular book that might interest me or listening to my favorite booktubers talk about it, for me, it's about what's different. What is different about the synopsis? Okay, fine, it has a trope, but what's different about it? So an example off the top of my head are the Lunar Chronicles books by the one and only Queen, Marissa Meyer. And I know these have been out for like a long time and it's YA. Get off your high horse, it's fine. That's a fairy tale retelling, basically, of Cinderella. The first one, anyway. But it's science fiction, and she's a cyborg. That's different, right? She doesn't lose her slipper at the ball. She loses her whole foot. Like, in one of the sequels, Cress, that's a Rapunzel retelling. Rapunzel, in this case, is not stuck in a tower, but stuck in a satellite, completely isolated as a computer hacker for an evil queen. Like, what? Also, those books are simultaneously fairy tale retellings and a Sailor Moon retelling. Like, that, everything about that is just, it's built different. I love things that, like, I read the description, I'm like, ooh, that's a different take on that type of story, or I've never read anything quite like that before. Those are things that draw me in, and I feel like that's why I'm just not into tropes, because if I'm constantly looking for things that are different, I feel like maybe I'm just seeking a different kind of reading experience than people who are gravitating towards tropes, but that's just, and I think that everyone's different. I'm not saying that if you like tropes, you're a bad reader, you're not looking for unique things or whatever. Like, we're all in this together, right? Okay, we're all readers. Don't get bent out of shape. But like I said, if we're not looking for tropes, looking for what's different, I think is a way to go. One of the biggest things that gets me is, what is the atmosphere of the story? Because I love writing that creates some kind of atmosphere. I really jump for joy when I hear that something has a haunting atmosphere, especially if it's not just like, obviously if it's a horror, it better have a haunting atmosphere. But like, you got a fantasy with a haunting atmosphere, a contemporary with a haunting atmosphere, a sci-fi with a haunting atmosphere. Hi, Jeff Vandermeer, I love you. Yeah. Count me in. I love that. And and I think some people are really realizing that they like cozy things. And I think that I feel like I'm seeing a big intersection. People that appreciate cozy things oftentimes appreciate tropes, because I think they want to read for, a sense of comfort. And I personally don't like cozy reads that much. So that's something I've understood. Sunny! Cat. Sunny! Come here. Come play. I got your bottle cap. You love this thing. Woo! Yes! You gonna say hi to the camera if I hold it up here? You gonna stand? No, he doesn't want to show off. I'm sorry. So yeah, I'm not super into cozy things, but for some people, that atmosphere, just knowing that something is considered cozy, that's the atmosphere, that's the vibe, that draws them in. in general, if it's just a story that is considered atmospheric, that to me means that you really feel the setting and the mood, right? And that's a term that draws me in. If something is atmospheric, I like that. Now Sunny's loving on the camera stand. Come here. You're moving me. The next thing that can really make a difference if we pick up a book, something else that we can look for is writing quality, right? And so everybody kind of has their own preferences. Some people like fast-paced, they like short, simple. Some people prefer flowery writing, purple prose, if you will. They like things that are lyrical. And that's just kind of obviously up to preference. Some people like things that are written in really complex, obscure ways. That's kind of like, I like things that are weird. I think that this can also come down to the way that the author structures their writing. So like, obviously YA is written at a quicker speed than adults. I mean, we have stuff like that, but then also shorter chapters versus longer chapters, right? I mean, even though I like complex things, I also love shorter chapters. Do I necessarily think that we should all just be picking up books simply because they have shorter, long chapters? No, I feel like we're falling into the pitfalls of, first and second person. But I'm saying it's one of the many qualities that we could probably associate with some of the faster or slower paces of writing. And Sunny's moving in. Another thing we could look at is thematic content. A lot of times the synopsis will give us hints on the thematic content of a story. So what particular themes are explored. If you like themes of, family, dysfunctional families, how we overcome trauma, if you like themes of independence, if you like feminist themes in your stories, things like that. Sometimes, you read a synopsis and you think, oh, sounds kind of interesting. And then they hit you with that, it's usually the last line of the synopsis where it's like, this is a tale of epic friendship and love, something like that. They're letting you know what kind of overall themes to look for are in there. And I think that sometimes we can gravitate towards those. And that could be, maybe you're reading a synopsis of a story that doesn't necessarily drawing you in every single way, but then maybe that's a tipping point. Maybe you're like, oh, so wait a minute. If this story is going to go in this thematic direction, you can kind of imagine how that story might play out and if it's something that you're going to be really interested in. Because I'm telling you right now, one of my favorite books of all time, and I don't give a crap how dated you think this is or how weird, it's Blood and Chocolate by Annette Curtis Klaus. Annette Curtis Klaus? Annette Curtis Klaus. And here's the thing. It's got a lot of the things I've already talked about in it. It seems like your typical YA paranormal. It's about a girl who's a werewolf who wants to tell her human boyfriend. Okay, it doesn't sound spectacular. But the atmosphere. It's written in mostly the summer getting into the fall. And the writing is so lush. Every time I read the descriptions of summer, it feels like summer to me. I feel like I'm in it. The descriptions are so on point. I love them so much. And then we have thematic content that I've never really come across in any young adult book. Honestly, any book, really. But basically the whole message of it is that we have to be with people that understand and love all of us, not just the nicest pieces of ourselves. And that's what carries that book away from me. I love it. I love a book with a good theme. And then in science fiction, I think that one of the reasons I'm so drawn to that is, a lot of the thematic content is what does it really mean to be human? How do we cope with change? How do we fight for survival? Stuff like that. So I feel like, interest in thematic content can push you towards different genres as well. But I don't know, it just kind of depends. I'm going to throw this in narrative choices. And no, I don't, I've talked about this before, I do not mean those people that are I won't read anything in third person. I don't necessarily mean that, but there are some narrative choices that I feel draw us to or away from certain books. So time jumps, things that span across a long period of time, things that go forward and backward in time. And I don't even necessarily mean time travel. Maybe you're following 3 characters across different time periods. One's in the 1500s and one is in the 1800s and one is in the 2100s in the future. It just kind of depends. I think I really love those. I'm sure that there's a lot of people that get annoyed with time jumps and following multiple timelines, and maybe it's not their thing. Maybe they would rather focus on one present moment. And then I think that multiple narrators, that's another narrative choice. I mean, maybe you're on the fence about reading a particular thing, but you find out that it's dually narrated between two different perspectives, and you like that and you do that. I love that. I love dual narration. I got that from my girly Beth Revis over here. When I read Across the Universe by Beth Revis and those alternating points of view, shooketh. Love it. I love that structure. And some people love reading several points of view, like in fantasy. I'm talking with my hand and it's in a hair tie that I'm fidgeting with, sorry. I was using that to distract Sunny a bit ago. But some people really don't like multiple points of view. Sometimes I think people think it bogs down the story. For me personally, a lot of times when I'm dealing with multiple points of view, for some reason the first thing that's coming to mind are like the Throne of Glass books. I would get really invested in a lot of the side storylines, sometimes even more so than the main. Like, honestly, Manon's story, iconic. Love it. And so this is like another pattern that we see in literature. Again, you might be reading a description and be like, oh, it's kind of cool. And then you know that and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I think I'm going to like this. The last thing I want to talk about, I know people like to say plot-driven versus character-driven. I hate those terms so much. And there was a tweet I saw from an author. I can't even remember who it was. But basically, they were talking about how you can't have plot-driven versus character-driven when both factors should drive the story. And I'm like, yes! Like, what does that even mean? And so I think for me, maybe this is what people mean when they say that. But instead of like character-driven versus plot-driven, I think that something we can look for in, deciding what to read and figuring out what we like other than tropes, reflective versus active plots. External plots versus internal plots. So are we going to focus on action, fast-paced, stuff happening to our characters, or do we want to be more in the person's head? For me, I love that perfect balance of action and reflectiveness. I think we see this in a lot of sci-fi, which is, again, why I love the genre. I think that really good horror leads into a lot of internal plot. I think this is why people love the Netflix Hill House and the Netflix Bly Manor, for that matter. I think everyone's going to have their preference on how a story is told. You might read this description of a fantasy book and think it's up your alley and expect something that's action driven, but then it ends up being reflective and it's not your thing. And so I feel like it's kind of important to know what you like in that regard, and if you prefer a balance, if you like one like reflective more than active or vice versa. I can't speak English today. I am so sorry. You know what I'm saying? I feel like that makes a difference. So I feel like this is a small list, and it's still patterns in literature, so you could still argue that I'm arguing to care about other tropes than others, but at least the traditional plot type of tropes that we're seeing, these are some other things that we can care about and that we can use to define our reading tastes, and kind of use as a guide, in figuring out what we like and what other patterns we enjoy. Obviously, if you're into tropes and that's working for you, this video might not even be useful for you. That's okay. You found, you pinned down the things that you like. But if you're ever kind of like, I'm tired of the same tropes, what do I like outside of this? I feel like these are some good things to take a look at. Let me know in the comments, because I know I don't have that many, if you can think of anything else that I missed. Let me know, because I'm really curious to see what other patterns you guys like in books that aren't tropes that I missed. All right, so I have some kind of more videos kind of planned out. I'm really happy with the turnout and the viewership of the last one. I thought that 5 people would see that one because the algorithm hadn't liked me that much lately. I got a lot of good feedback. That was my first discussion-y video, and I have one right now. In the future, though, I am actively filming a vlog that'll be up. I don't know when it's gonna be up. I'm just kind of winging it at this whole YouTube thing, but thank you for being here. I'm excited that I had a mini subscriber surge, a surge for my channel, you know what I'm saying? So it's mini, but I did have a little bit of a surge. If you're new here, I hope you're enjoying the content. I'm hoping to make more, but yeah, I hope you guys are doing well, or as well as we can in this very chaotic world, but yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye.
Oh, look at this cutie in the messy closet. Oh.
He doesn't want to say hi.